I'm gonna pass this along to John and he can get us started.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. John Hirano. I'm with the Institute for Financial Literacy. This is Sarah. Let her introduce herself.
I'm Sarah. I'm a financial aid counselor here at UNLV from the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships.
Before we get started, if you are on your laptops or on your phones, I guess if you're on your laptop and you can scan the QR code with your phone, I would suggest doing that. It'll help us with some of the activities we'll be doing throughout our workshop today. But if you are on your laptops or on your phone, I suggest going over to Slido and then find the links there to kind of be able to log on with us later as we go on a little bit here. But as we jump in, we'll let Sarah kind of start things.
All right, so financial flight path. Today we're going to be talking about deciphering your offer of financial aid as well as planning your budget as a student at UNLV. But first, in one word, this is our first interactive activity. In one word, how do you feel when you think about managing your college money? So something to think about if you're able to put in the word, what thinks about it. Let's see. Wait, what was the code? I think the code is on the side right there. Okay, give everyone a few seconds to input a word. So stressful, nervous. I can definitely relate to that. Any other words? Overwhelmed. Any other words? Okay, overwhelmed just got bigger. A lot of overwhelmed. Stressful, nervous. Any other words that we can think of? Anyone else? Anything in the chat? No? Okay, but overwhelmed, stressful, nervous, crying emoji. I can definitely relate to that. There's a lot of that and definitely understandable. Financial aid and budgeting all can be very daunting, especially to a first-time student at UNLV or just a first-time student at college and anywhere. And so hopefully this presentation will give a little clarity, reassurance, hopefully help cope with those feelings of overwhelmedness and stress and nervousness. So hopefully this will be a helpful presentation to you all. But we will get right into it and the types of financial aid there are. So there are three primary types of financial aid. All of these can make up your financial aid package, and it's really important to note that a lot of different factors go into determining what financial aid that you're eligible for. So, and everyone's financial aid offers can look different for a number of different reasons. So maybe if you have a friend and thinking, oh, our financial aid packages are different, why is that? There's probably a lot of different factors at play there. So it's normal for students' financial aid packages to look a little different based off of, your certain circumstances. So first we have grants and scholarships. This is aid that does not need to be repaid. It's often referred to as free money. However, it's basically money that does not need to be repaid. It is awarded, or it can be awarded based off of financial need, academic achievement. There are a lot of external scholarships students apply for because they submit an essay or have references. There are a lot of different grants and scholarships out there that students receive. And when a student is awarded a grant or scholarship, it is applied directly to a student's bill, directly to your charges. Then we have loans. So a lot of times after a student has grants and scholarships applied to their balance, sometimes they're going to have a little bit of a balance left over that they need to pay, or maybe they have other educational expenses that they have and are like, oh, I need some extra funding to help cover this. That's where a lot of students tend to opt to utilize loans. So loans are borrowed money, so they do need to be repaid eventually, and interest may apply to the loans that you take out as well. Again, the main purpose of loans is to help in covering any remaining costs that a student has, and it is considered a form of aid. Then lastly, we have work study. This is a little different than a loan or a grant or scholarship. This is basically a part-time job opportunity where students earn money over time through a paycheck while working a job on campus. So it's basically working a standard job. The primary difference that I like to explain it to students is that basically instead of being paid with the department's money, you're being paid with federal money. So that's the main difference when it comes to federal work study. It's also important to know that you don't have to be eligible for federal work study to have a job on campus. A lot of jobs on campus, typically they like to look for work study students, and it often plays into a student's benefit if they are. So, and again, with the work study money or the money that you're earning through your work study job, it's money that's paid to you as a paycheck, and you're able to use those funds for any personal expenses that you have. So you're not obligated to use it towards your bill. You could if you wanted to, but it's really just intended to help you with any personal expenses you have. All right, now more into federal loans. For an undergraduate student, there are two federal loans a student could be eligible for or considered for. We have the subsidized loan, which is a need-based loan, and then we have the unsubsidized loan, which is not a need-based loan. So that means oftentimes students are going to be considered or offered an unsubsidized loan, but not all students are going to be offered the subsidized loan. It's important to note the interest rate of these loans is 6.52% as of right now. And it's really important to note that the subsidized loan will not accrue interest while you are enrolled in school in at least half time. Half time is at least 6 credits. On average, a class could be worth 3 credits, so that's about 2 classes a lot of times to be half time. Whereas the unsubsidized loan, that will begin accruing interest as soon as you take that loan out. So a lot of times when a student comes to us and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking out loans, if we see that they were offered the subsidized loan, we typically encourage them to say, hey, maybe you should utilize the subsidized loan first, as it's not going to accrue interest while you're enrolled in at least half time. For both of these loans, no credit check is required. You don't need a cosigner or any credit history. All you need to do is complete the FAFSA to be considered for these federal loans. And then there are 2 essential requirements that students need to complete in order to have these federal loans dispersed. And that is the master promissory note and the loan entrance counseling. Both of these can be completed through studentaid.gov, and I typically recommend students to complete them at the same time, as well as to complete them a little earlier. As soon as you know you're going to accept your loans, make sure you complete them because they can take 4 to 6 days to process. So really important to complete both of those so your loans to disperse. And then you'll see this chart here that has basically the annual loan limits for each student based off of their academic year as well as their dependency status. Those are the 2 primary factors that go into determining what a student's annual loan limit is. So you'll see here a first-year student that is a dependent, their annual loan limit is $5,500, and $3,500 of that is able to be used as a subsidized loan, with the remainder being unsubsidized loan. Feel free to take a picture of that chart too, very helpful. And you'll see as you go up an academic level, you'll see that your annual loan limit increases as well. Now we have the cost of attendance. This is a fun one. So a lot of students will see their cost of attendance on their financial aid portal or their financial aid notification and think, is that what I'm paying for school? And the answer to that question is no. That is not your actual bill. Your cost of attendance does not equate what you are paying to UNLV. Basically, what your cost of attendance is, it is an estimate. It is a student budget that we create to determine, okay, all of your direct costs and indirect costs. It's basically all the expenses that UNLV thinks you are going to encounter as a person living and attending UNLV. So the cost of attendance takes into consideration direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs are costs that you are actually paying to UNLV. So this is tuition fees, on-campus housing and meal plans if you are living on campus, but then also it takes into consideration indirect costs you have, so personal estimates. These are expenses that you're not necessarily paying directly to UNLV, but we know that you need to pay for these things in order to be a student at UNLV. And that includes books and supplies, off-campus housing, transportation, personal expenses. Personal expenses could be your lunch money or your morning coffee. All of those expenses are taken into consideration when we create your cost of attendance. And so the primary purpose of a cost of attendance is it tells our office, okay, this is the most amount of money that we think you are going to spend at your time at UNLV for this year. So this is the maximum amount of money that you would be able to utilize in financial aid for the academic year. That's the primary purpose of cost of attendance for our office. However, the cost of attendance is also used to serve as a budgeting guide. So basically, you'll have an itemized list of the estimate of all your direct costs as well as indirect costs. And from there, you can determine, okay, based off of these estimates, maybe I do want to enroll into a payment plan, or maybe I do want to utilize my federal loan offers to help in covering any educational expenses that I have remaining after that. It's really important to know that your cost of attendance with all of these estimates, it doesn't take into consideration or factor in the financial aid you receive. And that is because we use the cost of attendance to help determine how much financial aid you can receive. So that's important to note there. This is just all straight flat charges or straight flat estimates of what you could encounter with your charges, both direct and indirect. And then also important to note, with your grants and scholarships, all of them are going to be applied directly to all of your direct costs. So all of your grants or scholarships are going to be applied to the direct charges on your account that you see in your payment portal or you see in your MyUNLV account, all going to be applied directly there. Say if all of your grants and scholarships or financial aid covers your entire balance and you have a remainder of financial aid left over, you're able to receive that remaining financial aid as a financial aid refund, and you're able to use that towards any other educational expenses that you have. For questions regarding enrolling into direct deposit or financial aid refunds, feel free to reach out to the Office of Cashiering and Student Accounts. They're really great and helpful with that. But that is basically what cost of attendance is. And here you will see the financial aid notification. This is basically what students receive, their financial aid offers, what they're eligible for both grants and scholarships, loans, if they're eligible for work study. And then at the very bottom, you'll see the cost of attendance there. So quick example here. Here we see that this student's cost of attendance is $24,571. What does that mean? That means that the student can receive a maximum of $24,571 in financial aid that year, whether it's grants and scholarships, federal work study loans, all of that. Really important to know that the student is not actually paying $24,071 to UNLV. That's the big thing. Okay. Now we're going to have a little bit of a quiz section here. Okay, so feel free to join. This is our first question that we have. Based on the offer letter on your screen, which of these awards will need to be paid back? First, we have the Millennium Scholarship, UNLV Tuition Plus, unsubsidized loan, federal Pell Grant. There's 3 seconds left. Anyone join? All right. You will need to repay the unsubsidized loan. This does need to be repaid. Great job to those who answered and participated. This does need to be repaid. Now moving on to our next question. Okay, true or false? The cost of attendance, COA, listed is the exact bill you will receive from UNLV. True or false? All right, everyone answered false. Let's see. And that is in fact correct. Thank you all. That is really important to know that the cost of attendance is not what you're actually paying to UNLV. Again, it is just your student budget, just an estimate. Now, last question, I believe. If your bill is $4,000 and you are offered a $6,000 loan, do you have to accept the full amount? Yes or no? All right, no, let's see. Yes, that is the correct answer. No, you do not have to accept your full amount. No student is obligated or required to accept any amount of their federal loans. It's surely there if students want to utilize it to help in cover any other educational expenses that they have. So great job with the participation. Now moving on. Congratulations. Oh, looks like, wow, everyone, a lot of great answers. Thank you, Ellen and Ellen. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Thank you for participating. And then moving on, looks like the hardest question was which of these awards will need to be paid back. So great job, everyone. Thank you for participating. And now we're going to move on to the Price is Right Rebel Edition. I will hand it off to Joe.
Hey everybody, great job on the first part. So now we're going to dive into a little bit of another game. So if you're already in Slido, stick around. Are you guys able to see us, or is our camera not on this whole time?
I didn't know if it was just me, but it's off on my screen.
Hi.
Perfect.
If you haven't seen Sarah or either of us for a minute here, um, give me 1 second. Let me see if there's a reason why this isn't working the way it is. Give me 1 second. Hands up. Hey, everybody. Can you guys all see me now?
Great.
You
Yes,
hear me
it's good.
okay?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry for that confusion earlier. I wish you had told us. We would have gotten that adjusted. Um, so now we're going to jump into a little bit here. So get back into Slido if you weren't there already. I'll put a code up as we get started here for the next one. So scan it real quick and come back in. But we're going to do a little bit of games. Do you guys all know how to play The Price is Right out there? No?
Yes.
Maybe? Kind of? Okay, so all we're gonna do, I'm gonna be giving you guys a few items, and you guys have to guess. It's gonna be multiple choice. It's not a random answer, but you're gonna guess what is the correct price for a couple items. And so we'll dive into that. What we're gonna do is, even the winner from our last little quiz there, we'll get that email afterwards. And when you guys get to campus here in a few weeks, in about a month now, I guess we're kind of about a little over a month out. If you want to come and stop by over here at the Institute for Financial Literacy, we'll have a little bit of prize for you. We'll send out some reminders as we get closer. And we'll do the same for this. So for all those that are playing and all those that are here, we'll keep a record of whoever the winner is coming up here. And so it'll be both correct answers as well as your speed of your response. So everybody ready? If I can get some thumbs up as some reactions. Okay, great. I'll take that. I love that. Okay, here we go. So the first item we have is, okay, give you guys a chance to join the quiz. It's not jumping me straight into it, so we have a little bit of time here. Okay, we got two, four, five of you guys all joined in again. Awesome. Anyone else want to join us for this one? All right. Okay, we'll start with the five. If anyone else if that's online wants to join, feel free, you're free. There we go. One more. Great job. Okay, here we go. The first item is, oh, getting a few more in here. I'll give you guys a little bit more seconds. We have anonymous. Okay, let's go. So the first item we have here is, say you're planning on commuting to campus. So the commuter life. How much is an annual student parking permit for the academic year? So the whole year, how much is that parking permit? 2, 1, guesses are in. We got guesses all over the board from $198 all the way up to $354. And the correct answer is $354. So if you are planning on commuting and planning on parking on campus, this is how much a student parent. So this is part of budgeting, right? Understanding, oh man, this is a big cost that comes up front that you're gonna have to probably deal with day one of school, right? It's not something that I believe you guys can do on a payment plan. So as you are preparing for the next month, like, hey, do I need to save a little bit of extra money on hand to pay for something like my parking pass when we get started? Or as we've been talking a little bit earlier, understanding, what is the cost of attendance? This is one of the things that will play into that equation. We ready for the next one? Oh, our leaderboard. We got Wilford here in first place with a quick 5-second response to this. And so we're going to hit on to the next one. So let's go to the next question. The next one is we call it the academic gatekeeper. And so what we're looking at is, what is a single semester digital textbook access code in ebook? Long are the days gone of just owning a textbook or only needing a textbook for your classes. Now you also need an access code for things like math, chemistry, some of your sciences where you'll need a code to actually submit some of your assignments. Again, we have some things all over the place. Some of you said, is it free? Is it part of our tuition? And then we have 115, 165, and 210. And the correct answer for this one was 165. On average, we're looking at about $165 per class for some of these. So if you are thinking about being a science major, working in the STEM fields, this is something you need to kind of take into account, right? Especially as you move on from not just your first year, but your second and third year, your third and fourth year, where you might be taking mostly science classes, right? Mostly within your major, you multiply this by six, that cost kind of goes up very, very quickly. And unfortunately, it is not a free service. It is part of our bookstore, and so it's an additional cost on top of everything. Oh yes, how much I do wish it was free too. I think back when I was a student, many moons ago, I remember paying easily $300-400 for my physics book. So maybe the ebooks make things a little bit easier to swallow that pill. All right, we got a change in leadership because of time. Let's keep on going. Our third one. So what if we want to now have a little bit of campus pride? So you want to buy a hoodie as well as a hydro flask, right? You got to keep hydrated here in Vegas. If you're from out of town, this is priority one, right? Whether it is the cold, dry winters or 110 degrees today, hot summers, staying hydrated is super important. We got some answers again, a little bit every place, and this is good. I love to see this here. And the correct answer is about 110. So, right? Your hoodie might be about $80. Hydro Flask might be another 30, $20, $30. And that's how we get to this 110 number here. But that's something to be considered. Like, hey, if you want to have a little bit of campus pride, what is that going to cost your account? Moving on. Great job, number 3. Moving on to question number 4. For those that are living in the dorms, if we have some of you out there living in the dorms, we are looking at a basic meal plan, 14 weekly meals per semester, and $100 dining dollars per semester is what it's called. So being able to go and buy food in some other places. Again, we have some estimates all over the place. And this one will cost you, great job, a couple of you got it correct, $2,581 a semester is how much this is costing. But it is, right? It's 14 meals a week. We're talking about 15 weeks in the semester. So it's quite a high number of meals, but it's not eating there 3 times a day, right? That's 2 to 3 times a day, kind of depending. Maybe you start late in your day, maybe it's just dinner and lunch. Maybe you're like, I'm going out sometimes. And so maybe it's a breakfast here and there. But that's something that you can manage. And if you're including that, and if you are planning on living on campus, you are required to have a meal plan. And this is the most basic meal plan for those living on campus. Last item here. So Jacob has moved into first. We have a change in our leader here. So now let's talk about the last one. What is our last item? Toilet paper. How much does a 18 pack of premium extra soft toilet paper run you these days? Maybe you're like, I'm not using dorm toilet paper. I need something softer for my bottom. This is for you. But also it's one of those like everyday costs. What are our guess? Okay, so it's kind of down to 2 items. Is it $17.98 or $19.99? It's $17.89. Great job there for the majority of you guys who guessed that correct answer. And so our winner overall will be Jacob. Great job, Jacob. I think we should have your information if you want to drop a direct message to myself or to Viviana, or we can get that information to you. Please send a direct message. We can get that email address, and we want to make sure that on the back end we can get that covered. So please share that with us, and we want to make sure we can get that information out. Why do we do this? What is the point of this? The point of this is that we have to, in order to have a budget, in order to understand our costs, we have to be able to understand how much things cost, right? If you didn't know parking was $354, how would you plan for that, right? Or if you're thinking about, hey, I want to go out and eat around town, I want to go eat at what we call the student union, all those things kind of factor into that everyday budget. And so what we want to do is kind of open your eyes to what are some of those things that you want to be considering as you are planning going forward. What do you mean by? We'll come back to some of those questions. I see some great questions in the chat. We'll get to those after. I think we have some first help FYEs helping out with some of those questions. So the thing that I want to talk about here when it comes to budgeting is this idea of the 50-30-20 rule. We call this the most simple form of kind of a form of the budget. It's a framework, right? It's how can you take all of your take-home income, right? So whether that is a little bit extra money, a loan you might have taken out from your financial aid package. Maybe you're like one of my friends when I was in college that had enough scholarships that like they paid him to go to schools even more outside of his scholarship money. So if I remember correctly, I think he had an extra like $3,000 or $4,000 worth of scholarships that after all of his bills were paid, living on campus and everything, he got a check written out to him that would help him to pay for other expenses, his books and so forth. Um, or whatever it is, or it is a job that you're having, how do we use that money, right? So we take that number, we kind of extrapolate it over the months, right? So if you're getting a large chunk, we divide it by four, about the 4 months over the semester, and then from there we kind of create a budget, create a plan going forward. And so there's three main areas to this framework. The first is 50% or the 50. This is your needs, right? So this is honestly your bare bones essentials, right? So this is your groceries, this is your rent, this is your utilities. For maybe some of you, you're living on your own, you're planning on renting an apartment one day. So yeah, you got to think about some of these numbers. Maybe you're living at home. Okay, so your rent might be zero. Maybe you help out with the family, you have a little bit of rent to pay to your family. Whatever your situation is, the reason I love this framework is that it's flexible, right? So we always say, hey, start with 50%. So if your take home is $2,000 a month, you set $1,000 high for those essentials, right? And I mean the essentials. From there, we move over to our wants. This is where this is the fun stuff, right? This is your eating out. This is maybe your streaming services, your gaming, your movies, shows, whatever else that you love to do. If you love traveling, hey, that's part of that want bucket, right? I'll talk a little bit more about the differences between the line between needs and wants, and how do we define it. And I honestly say there's a little bit of a gray area here. For everybody, it's a little bit different. I always say one of the examples I always share for myself is getting my hair cut. That gets budgeted in my needs, right? For me, getting away for an hour to my stylist and not thinking about the world is one of my needs and has been a need since I was in high school. And so I've always set money aside. I've always planned for it, knowing how much it was going to cost me to do something a little bit nicer for myself. But it was allowed me to make sure that the rest of the time, the rest of the things I do, I either feel good about the way I look and the way I feel, or just already had a little of those breaks in the business of my life. And the last one here is our savings and debt. We always say, sometimes we say, hey, start here. Start with the 20%. Make sure you pay yourself first. You might have heard these phrases before. 20% we always say is a great place to kind of put that money away, right? And this isn't, I'm saving money for my next trip. This is, I'm saving money for an emergency. I'm putting away some money for the future. Maybe you're thinking about investing, you're thinking about retirement at 18. Great. That kind of falls into this bucket. Or maybe it is some of that debt, right? Maybe you have some of those unsubsidized bills that you're thinking about, hey, how do I get ahead of that? How do I stay on top of the interest that is accruing from the day that I take that money out? Okay, maybe I'm going to at least pay down some of the interest. So when time comes to pay down this student loan one day, I'm not accruing all this extra interest on top of it. So those are some things to think about as far as that savings and debt area. But realistically, this is kind of that framework. And one of the things I do want to mention is that this framework is flexible. And that's where we talk about this power grid. Since we're talking about flight plans, we're using that as an analogy. That needs is that first column there. That throttle always at 100%, right? So we're always going to say 50% of our budget is going to those needs. There is a few occasions where that might be a little bit less, right? Maybe you are living on campus, you're living in dorms, and all that, the cost of rent, cost of food is coming out of that first category. There are a few situations where that might not be 50% of your budget anymore. Maybe that is 10% of your budget. But your needs always are going to kind of be fulfilled first, right? And we want to make sure your needs are fulfilled because that's one of the most important things about kind of survival, right? Also, whenever we're worried about our needs, whenever we're worried about the finances around those things, it has a direct impact on our performance when it comes to our classes, when it comes to work, when it comes to life in general, right? Anytime anyone's been stressed before at all for any reason, right? Whether it's life, it's something personal, whether maybe it is some of your finances you're worried about, those things always have a direct impact on how you do in school. And right, what we don't want to happen is this cycle, right? Or like, hey, all of a sudden you have this life stress which leads to poor performance in classes, which can then impact your financial aid package and your scholarships. And then now you have more stress. And then it's kind of this downward spiral that we want to prevent, this snowballing effect. The middle one there, that's your savings. that the reason we always want to put money away in that savings from the get-go is that life happens, right? Maybe you get a flat tire, maybe you need to go home for something. And I always say your emergencies aren't always negative. Sometimes it's like, hey, you need to go home for a special occasion, right? I think as we get older, as you start living life, as adults, sometimes you have a friend who's like, hey, I'm getting married in like 2 months. Can you make it home? And I wasn't planning all last year for a trip back to Hawaii where I came from. So now I'm going to take some of that money out of my savings, that emergency fund, to do something fun and do something that I know is going to be very meaningful for me and my friendship. But it's coming out of that emergency fund. It's not always a flat tire. The last one there is our wants. That's where we have a little bit of control, right? Sometimes we're in a situation where we can be full 30% on our wants. Sometimes we have to tone it down. Maybe we have to bring it down to 10% so we can afford a couple extra bills. Hey, we don't have to tap out our savings completely in order to do something fun or do something that we think is meaningful or to fix a repair. So those are some of the things that we're saying that like, hey, when it comes to 50, 30, 20, it is a framework to start with, but it's also very adjustable. We can tweak those percentages to work for whatever your current situation is. And as an institute, we're always here as a support. Like, hey, you have those questions? We'll always say, hey, come on by, visit us, and we'll have those conversations. Help. What's the right balance for you? And then my
Your
camera went.
yeah, it just went off.
Sorry for all the technical difficulties today. We're going to back up here just a little bit. And this is the last other part that I wanted to quickly talk to you guys about was this hidden cost, right? When we talk about needs, we talk about bare essentials, right? So this might be talking about, hey, what is the cost of just, the examples here is toilet paper and textbooks. You can buy the bare minimum in terms of like toiletries, or you can buy the nice stuff, right? What is really a need for someone? This is where the line gets blurred, and you have to make some of those adjustments. Another area that this comes across sometimes a lot as a student is, do I buy a used book or do I buy a brand new textbook? There are some times where it's like, you know what? I'm gonna buy a used book because I want to return it anyways, or I'm gonna sell it off afterwards anyways. I don't need a fresh copy. But maybe you're somebody you're very stickler about the way you study. Like you want no highlights in there, whatever highlights goes in my textbook, I have to do it. I don't want anything in my margins. I want fresh pages. Then maybe that becomes a little bit of a luxury, but you're like, hey, I'm not going to be successful as a student without it. Then maybe it does move into your needs. And so that's some of that flexibility we want to be aware of buying new books versus used books. You also have opportunities to rent these days. And then also sometimes the library has some of the textbooks on rental that you can have, right? Maybe you're going to take it out, do what obviously you can mark it as the way you would as your own book, but maybe you'll scan a few pages. There's some other things that you can do in order to get that resource while managing your money. Because it's hard because those books are expensive. Um, I always say when I was a student, we didn't have as much opportunities, right? It was really just, do you buy a used book or do you buy a new book? And our professors were very stickler about like having your books always. So you had to pick one of those two. There wasn't like a third option. So the last thing that we're going to do is kind of really understand how does this fit together in your life? How does it fit together at the end of the day? And we call this the campus dilemma persona challenge. So I want you guys to meet Sophia. Sophia is a first generation commuter student. She's living at home, so she's driving into campus every day. She has that $354 parking bill. But let me tell you a little bit about her. She makes $400 a month on a part-time job on campus. She has a little bit of money from financial aid, that's from her financial aid refund that she has to play with. So she put a little bit of that away. She pays for her own gas, she pays for her own parking permit, all of her access codes, all her book stuff, as well as hanging out with her friends, right? So she's here, she's trying to live her best life. But something happens. It happens to all of us. Sophia's alternator breaks, and this repair costs $200, which, to be honest, is a very cheap alternator. If you're trying to figure out your own pricing. But it breaks and she needs to get this fixed, right? Because she's a commuter, right? She can't get to class unless she can drive there. Obviously, there's alternatives, but for the sake of the conversation, she wants to be able to drive to campus. She wants to be able to get to her classes. So she pays $200 out of her check this week, but now she won't have enough money to buy her access code and to go to her friend's birthday dinner, which is going to cost about what you see on the screen, about $115. I'm going to change my camera here, so I think it's bugging out.
Scenario.
There. We'll work with this. Can you guys hear me okay still? Can you say a thumbs up if I sound okay?
No.
All right. Cool. So that's our situation. So how do we work around this? How,
Okay.
what are we trying to address here? So we're saying, what is the smartest way for Sophia to handle this $200 emergency cost? Does she put the repair on a high interest credit card? We're going to jump in Slido again. If you're not there, jump in. I want to kind of get a feel for what the room is thinking here. So you put the high interest credit card and keep spending habits the same. Does she skip buying her math access code for a couple of weeks to free up the cash, meaning that she might not be able to submit some of her assignments? Or does she use the $160 from her savings bucket and trim maybe about $40 from her wants to cover the rest? As you guys go in there, you should have access to the code. Please submit what you guys think is the best response. Let's see what people are submitting. We have a whole bunch saying savings bucket, okay. And I think that's a great suggestion, right? The reality is there's no wrong answer here, right? There is what is the best answer. There isn't anything wrong with putting on a credit card. Is that the wisest? Maybe not. If you're gonna find a way to pay that down later, I wouldn't say completely not changing your habits is probably a good idea with that. But sometimes it's an emergency, right? Sometimes that's why we call them emergency cards. But the best option is to take some of that savings that she's already been building up, use that to take down as much as she can, and then trim a little bit from her wants, right? This might make going out a little bit more difficult and doing some of the life things more challenging, but you know, she's making some choices here. So now that we've done that, we've kind of flushed our savings. So life needs to still go on, right? And this is where we move on to what we call the aftershock. So Sophia's spent her cushion, her savings and her cushions is down to zero. Her wants budget is a lot smaller now, right? It's we said we're putting away, let's see if I get this number to pull up, 40 out of her wants, right? And she wasn't making that much, right, already. So what does she do? What happens? Life still happens, right? Just because an emergency happens here, it doesn't mean that everything else stops. And so her friends in her group come out and say, hey, there's a big concert coming out that's happening on campus. Tickets are $60. They're selling out fast. Sophia, come on, let's go. Come and join us, right? Friend is texting her, hey, Alexis is going, hey, can you come? You can't miss this. You need to be here. Just put on your credit card. It's okay. It'll be fine. Just put on your credit card and you'll make it back next month. You're still gonna work. You're gonna make more money. Just pay it off next month. Take it out of next month's budget, right? And that's real life. And that's what happens. So now, what are some options that we have here? So Sophia has some choices. How does she manage this peer pressure scenario? Does she just say, you know what, you're right. Put it on the credit card. Put the $60 on the credit card and don't miss out? Does she tap into next month's tuition and book funds and be like, you know what, I'll take a little bit out of my wants and needs for next month. It'll be fine. I have the cash. We'll manage it, right? I was putting some money aside to pay for some things, but we'll just move it over now. Or does she decline? She say, hey, actually, I'm just gonna hang out with some friends on campus. I'm gonna do something else because right now I just don't have the cash. So go ahead and submit your guys' responses. Decline the tickets. Everyone is declining, I think, so far. And I think financially, that is the best decision, right? I'm gonna be very honest with you. It is not the easiest of the decisions. the easiest of the decisions is to just swipe that card. Because who wants to miss out, right? The feeling I think we've all felt like that the concept of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out at some point in our lives. And I think as college students, especially say maybe we're here living on campus, it becomes even more pressing, right? Because it's not like if say she's commuting, so maybe she feels a little bit more disconnected, right? She's not always on campus like her friends that are dorming. She's like going back and forth all the time, driving back and forth, and so she's like, I really don't want to miss out. I don't want to just hang out around campus while you guys see this great concert. So she might do something that is financially a bit more irresponsible in order to kind of fulfill some of that social side and that human connection part. So I'm reading kind of what Sabrina says. Yeah, we say that's what so you say it here, but what will we actually be doing? I've been a student once. I know there are many times that I've should have budgeted for certain things and took money from one pocket to fill another just in order to have a good time with some friends. So if it happens to you, you're not alone. I want to let you know. But along the way of the journey, you have to have those realizations. Okay, if I'm going to make those sacrifices, there will be trickle effects that you need to be aware of as you go forward. And so the last key takeaways, I'm going to bring Sarah back up here as we kind of close things out, are here, right? So first off, everything that she talked about, decoding your aid, understanding your package. If you have questions, they can always come and see you guys.
Yes, always come see us.
And that's they're here to help kind of understand those pieces. When it comes to the real life spending and how does that all fit together, we at the Institute of Financial Literacy and Wellness are here to help with that piece of taking, okay, now that you have your package, you know what's coming in, how does this apply to real life? We're here to kind of help you guys with that. Anticipate those real costs we talked about a little bit before, right? How much do things really cost every day? That can help you budget and also plan for the future. And lastly, you build that flexible budget. I'm not here to say list out every single item. As you get older, you should, as you get a little bit more practice. But when you get started with budgeting, start those easy buckets. What is your savings? What are your needs? What are your wants? What is your savings? Get those money out into different places as quickly as you can. And then from there, you make some adjustments. You find out, hey, actually, you know what? I'm doing pretty good on my needs. I'm living at home. I'm just driving every day. Maybe I don't need to put 50% of my take-home pay into that bucket. Make some adjustments. I will always be the first person to say maybe put a little bit extra in your savings before you put more in your wants. But I won't judge you if you say I'm going to put more in my wants than my savings. I will say that. But with that being said, as I click all the wrong ways. Last thing I want to do here is give you guys an opportunity to scan this QR code. We really appreciate any feedback that you guys have. While you guys do that, we're also willing to answer any questions you guys have. Anything in the chat that maybe we have missed so far, we can see it up here on our big screen. Or is there anything else that you guys have? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question.